Paul wanted to spread the good news to the ends of the earth, just as Jesus commanded. Paul still headed to Jerusalem, even though he knew he'd face difficulties there in his last missionary journey. Not even a week had passed since Paul arrived in Jerusalem before the Jews who hated him started to plot against him. Paul took the strangers and entered the synagogue. At the time, any strangers that visited the synagogue had to be killed. Paul was mistaken, and suddenly the Jews gathered around him. They took Paul out of the synagogue and tried to kill him. Upon hearing about this uproar, the Roman commander went to the synagogue with the Roman army and centurions. The angry Jews were striking at Paul, and the commander, not knowing what's going on, had to get the soldiers to get Paul out of there. Right then, Paul said to the commander, "Please let me speak to those who strike me." Even in the midst of violence and death, Paul still wanted to spread the gospel. When the commander allowed Paul to speak, Paul told them how he came to believe in God, and that's why he was in Jerusalem to testify his faith. He said, "I'm a Jew. I was born in Tarsus and learned the commandments under a famous rabbi, and like you, I treated God with contempt. I persecuted people who believed in Jesus, put them in jail, and even killed them. But when I was in Damascus, chasing after those who believe in Jesus, a light shone on me from heaven, and I heard God's voice saying, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?' He told me that he'd send me to strangers." Paul was telling them that he had to obey what Jesus commanded him. Upon hearing this, the Jews cried out, "Let's kill this man! He shall not be left alive!" Just like the crowd shouted to nail Jesus on the cross, they shouted against Paul. In the end, Paul was jailed by the commander. And from that day until his death, Paul lived without freedom. But although his body was jailed and he had no freedom, something amazing happened. Paul was able to speak about what kind of person he was and how he changed, not only in front of the high priests of Jerusalem and the Sanhedrin council, but also to the Roman governor of Judea of Caesarea. Although he was locked, Jesus' good news and the gospel that Paul spread was not. Paul said, "Where Jesus' spirit is, there is freedom." Just like what he said, he was jailed, but more free than anyone else in the world. Paul said, "Always spread the good news whether or not you get the chance." And as he preached, Paul always spread the gospel whether he was free or jailed. Guys, we got to know the gospel through Paul. Just like him, let's obey Jesus' command for us, whether or not we have the freedom or time. This week, I hope you spread Jesus' news anywhere and anytime.